I was addicted to consuming media. I would mindlessly scroll on all the social media apps, watch YouTube videos or shows on Netflix, and even when I put the screen away, the noise would keep going. Like, I remember I'd be falling asleep and I would hear TikTok audios like shouting in my brain. Or I'd start thinking about drama from Love is Blind, or I'd think back to a really depressing news story I saw on Instagram that day, and I just had a really hard time sitting in silence. And way too many of the thoughts in my brain were due to me being a passive consumer of content. And I remember watching the self-help videos on YouTube that say to do things that are good for your mental health, like meditate, exercise, read, socialize, write in a journal. But when you're addicted to consuming media, like all of these things on paper, yeah, they sound great, I should really be doing all these things, but they feel nearly impossible to do when you have this constant impulse to open up a social media app and start scrolling. You might have the intention to do something productive, but suddenly you're on a new tab and look, it's the YouTube homepage and oh, now my attention's getting pulled in all these different directions. Or you feel tired after a day of work and then it just feels like the only good way to relax is by turning your brain off and putting a show on. And you feel busy because consuming all this content kind of gives you this feeling that you're doing something, but how many times do you find yourself at the end of the night feeling like you just fell into this content hole? Whether you kept scrolling on TikTok for several hours or you kept pressing continue watch on a Netflix show way longer than you planned on. I'm sorry, one second. Could you stop banging those drums?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even know you could hear that. Carry on.
Anyway, the content binges. I've been there. I feel like I overconsumed media for years, and I tried a lot of different things to get this habit under control. And I finally feel like I figured out how to consume content with much more moderation and with intention. And as a result, I just feel so much more present and creative. So I'm gonna share what worked for me in the hopes that maybe it'll work for you too. So when we look for a solution to this problem of social media addiction, or whatever you wanna call it, I think we're normally chasing this idea of getting from point A to point B. From being addicted to our phones or watching YouTube all the time to someone who reads, practices mindfulness, they take cold plunges, they're super creative and productive all the time. But I think the problem with this is that there's too much friction. You can't go from someone who's conditioned with these habits to taking on this whole new identity. I've tried to make that jump. I've tried to just quit the apps cold turkey, but the changes just aren't sustainable for me. And also deep down, there's things about social media that I know that I don't want to give up. And so I feel like that's why I really don't try that hard. I think that the change doesn't have to be so drastic. I've found that there's this middle ground where you can still consume content and use the apps that you're used to using, but just use them in a healthier way. And it all really comes down to making this one major mindset shift. Your number one priority during your downtime isn't to be entertained. Your number one priority should be to learn. And I mean to learn specifically about the things that interest you. Currently, when you're using social media, you probably feel like you're learning a lot, right? You're learning what's going on in the world, you're learning what stuff you should buy, you're learning what random celebrities are up to, you're hearing the news, it's mostly bad news. Occasionally you'll find some kind of golden piece of content that's related to your passions and interests, but when it's buried underneath all that other noise, it's just so hard for it to really be that impactful, at least in my experience. The thing that you're up against is that these platforms have studied your behavior. They know exactly what to put in your feed to get you to keep scrolling. And so what I tried, and I highly recommend you to try, is to build a whole new algorithm, but with extreme intention.
Okay, oopsie, I just realized that I didn't explain that to make a new algorithm, you want to log out of your current accounts, doesn't matter what platform, YouTube, Instagram, wherever, and create a new account. And that's where you'll build your new algorithm. Okay, back to the video.
To do this, think about the areas that you're curious to learn more about and things that inspire you to take action and be creative. And maybe you already know of some creators that you follow on your current account who you get this kind of inspiration and knowledge from. So on your new account, go look these people up and engage with their content. You can also look up keywords, like say you want to learn more about psychology or you want to find more recipes, and like those things inspire you to take action or make you want to learn deeper. Go and look those things up and find content that's really good in that area and only engage with those things. And you're going to find that things from your old algorithm are going to try to creep in there. They're going to try to creep into your feed, but when that happens, don't click, don't watch, as quickly as possible, swipe that stuff away, because that is not what you're using media for. You're using it very intentionally. And I found that it's all of that noise, all of the things that cause me to feel these really heightened emotions. That's what makes me doom scroll and waste a lot of time. If you have a similar experience, then I recommend just trying to avoid that at all costs and just stay focused on the content that promotes curiosity and creativity.
Okay, hey, I'm back to clarify. I'm not necessarily trying to say you should stop consuming the news completely, but I'm just suggesting, rather than getting your news filtered through a social media algorithm, just going directly to your reliable source once a week, once a day, and just being intentional. I'm going to consume the news now. That's what you're doing, rather than having it just kind of thrown at you through a feed. Just an idea to think about for preventing that doom scroll.
I've done this process across all of my different media sources, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and I can honestly say that I find so many more sparks to follow. And sometimes those sparks lead me to a deeper form of learning, like to a book, or the spark leads me to have my own creative idea and execute it. And I found that the more sparks like this that you have, the more often you want to spring into action. And if you're springing into action, then you're not scrolling. But in order to truly maximize these sparks and turn them into something useful, there are a few habits that are super important to have when consuming content. The first is active note-taking, specifically using the second brain system. For so many years, I would see something cool on social media and I'd press save on it in the app, or I'd take a screenshot, or I'd record a voice note, and I never labeled these things, and as a result, I never went back to them, and I think there were so many sparks that ultimately got lost because I didn't have a good system to keep track of things. So the way that the second brain works is that you have a running list of projects that you're working on, either that can be professional or personal, and you also have different areas of interest that you're constantly collecting information for. I found that taking notes when consuming content really slows me down because it forces me to think about how that piece of content can be relevant to either a project I'm working on or something that I'm interested in. And that, for me, makes a huge difference in making the whole experience just feel more intentional. By the way, I think this practice is especially useful for YouTube. If you force yourself to write like a bullet point summary of every YouTube video you watch, you're gonna find yourself being a lot pickier about which video essays you click on, because you wanna make sure, is this one of my areas of interest, or is this gonna help me out with a project? And if not, sorry, not watching. And if you wanna learn more about how the second brain system works, look up Tiago Forte here on YouTube. He's the inventor of this whole thing. And if you're a Notion person, go watch this video, Red Gregory. She's amazing. She's created this template and it's free and I use it every day and I'm obsessed with it. So highly recommend. The second thing that helped me so much with specifically spending less time on my phone was using the grayscale feature. If you're already on the productivity side of YouTube, you've probably already heard of this. It's a feature in your settings that you can turn on. And I'm still mentioning it right now because it was such a game changer, especially on apps like Instagram. I feel like it lost so much of its appeal for me without the colors. And it makes sense. It's like this really fun to look at, this exact same picture, but no color. And it's so easy to just put down. And I think my favorite part of the grayscale feature is how the rest of the world just becomes so much more colorful. And normally it's the other way around. And so this was just so healthy for me to put my phone on black and white. And I don't know, it makes a really big difference. But the one thing I will add is turning on the shortcut to be able to easily switch it back and forth between color and black and white. You can do that by like triple clicking on the side button. I don't know, I'll put like a little screenshot on how to set up that shortcut. But for me, like I found a lot of valid reasons to change it back to color. Like I'd want to buy something online and I want to be able to like see what color I'm buying, or someone sends me like a picture of the sunset in a group chat and I'm like, I want to be able to see the sunset. And so if it's like quite a few layers deep in your settings and it's like a huge pain in the butt to switch it back and forth, you're eventually just going to leave it off because it's like too much of a hassle. But if it's really easy to switch back on, switch back off at any time, I feel like the habit just becomes a lot easier to sustain. And that's what we're all about, is making these sustainable changes. Also, with this black and white filter, sometimes I'll be scrolling on Instagram and I'll come across a video that's just like super artistic and cool, and I'll turn the filter off so I can experience it in color in its full glory. And then watching content in color starts to feel like a little treat that you can give yourself. And that is just another way to make the whole experience just like more intentional. Make sure that you're really enjoying it and not just like passively consuming, you know? Okay, so I know I focus a lot on making your consumption very education based, but I do still consume content for entertainment purposes only. There's just 2 changes that I've made to what I consume and how I consume it. The first is becoming more self-aware about how content makes me feel, even when I'm not watching it anymore. The reason I called out Love is Blind in the intro is because for some reason, that show, I can't watch that show and feel like relaxed and chill. I'm sure other people can. It's a me problem, but I get like hypnotized. I feel like I can't stop thinking about it. It just like really sticks in my brain, and I like need to know who ends up with who, and I'm just like, I get so obsessed. I've had to just cut that out of my life. I haven't seen the most recent season, and I do feel FOMO because I have friends to talk about it, but I just couldn't do it. It would just mess with me too much. I've been like asking around my friends and family and seeing if they have a version of that, like a certain kind of media that makes them feel that way. And I've heard like from one friend who was like, yeah, there's this one video game that I would play it and really enjoy it, but like even when I wasn't playing it, I would feel like I still was. Like it just kind of became this really like controlling force in his life. And I have another friend who like enjoys watching like paranormal, scary, like ghost stuff. Like in the moment she's enjoying it, but then it haunts her dreams. Like it'll really give her like nightmares. That's just to say that we're all different, and different forms of media makes us feel different. And I think the key is just trying to become really self-aware about, is this piece of content going to disturb me for a long time? If so, cutting that out of your queue, out of your routine, just entirely. The second change I've tried to make is just scheduling my like entertainment media consumption ahead of time. This is a tip from Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism. I find that I don't feel bad spending time like watching this guilty pleasure content if I chose ahead of time how long I was going to spend, and also was pretty specific about what I was going to watch. For me, when my self-esteem would like take a hit was when I would fall into this content hole kind of unintentionally. I'd spend way more time than I wanted to, and I'd also be watching stuff that I didn't even enjoy that much. And in that scenario, I just kind of felt like this passive participant in my own experience, rather than in that first scenario where like you're very much in control. You're not letting a feed dictate how you spend your time. And it just feels a lot more intentional. And like I said, like you'll notice that in your self-esteem that there is a difference. So that's the deck that worked for me. I really hope you can take something from one or some of these cards. I'm really trying to force this like card deck integration. I really deep down feel like developing a more intentional relationship with content is like a root change that can lead to a lot of other healthy habits. At least that's been the case for me. And I know I'm not an expert in all this. I'm really just speaking from my own experience, and I hope that something I've said is applicable to somebody else and helpful in some way. But I'm really hoping to use this YouTube channel as a resource for people who are trying to like work on their relationship with like media consumption. And I also am really curious about and love exploring how media impacts us like on an individual level and in society like at large. And so that's the kind of content I'm planning on making on this YouTube channel. And if you're interested in those things, if that resonates with your new algorithm, I hope that you stick around and I see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, last time, I realized that in this whole video, I did not address the whole social side of social media. And I have a lot of feelings about why I don't think social media is a great way to maintain real relationships. And I want to spend like a whole video talking about that and try to like include research and like be academic about it. But just so you know that I realize that that's missing, and I'm sorry I didn't really talk about it, but I hope you bear with me. This is my first video and I don't really know what I'm doing, honestly. Okay.